You're standing in the shadowed colonnade of the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, where the air hangs thick with the scent of myrrh and sweat-soaked linens. It's the summer of 64 AD, and the sun filters through gilded lattices, casting honeyed light on marble floors, veined like cracked flesh. Your fingers brush the cool porphyry walls, etched with frescoes of gods entwined in eternal congress, their forms twisting in silent ecstasy or agony, you can't tell which. Laughter echoes from the triclinium beyond, a low rumble like distant thunder, mingled with the pluck of lyres and the sharp gasp of breath caught in throats. Servants glide past, their trays laden with Falernian wine that tastes of sun-ripe figs and iron tang, spilling droplets that stain the mosaics of nymphs fleeing satyrs. A woman's voice rises, not in song, but in a plea, muffled by silk, and the emperor's shadow looms larger than the colossus outside. His laughter, a blade scraping bone. The guards' cuirasses clink softly, their eyes averted, hands steady on hilts worn from disuse. Your pulse quickens as a door swings open, revealing velvet cushions strewn like fallen petals, and the metallic bite of chains hidden beneath. They don't know yet that this palace, this ritual of flesh and power, will consume Rome's soul before the year is out. Before we go further, I need to be transparent. What you're about to hear involves sexual violence and systematic debauchery, woven into the fabric of imperial life. These details are historically documented, drawn from primary sources like Suetonius's The 12 Caesars, Tacitus's Annals, and Cassius Dio's Roman History, corroborated by archaeological remnants of the Domus Aurea excavated in the 20th century. But they are deeply disturbing, evoking the raw machinery of unchecked authority. If this content stirs discomfort or triggers memories you'd rather spare, I completely understand. Step away without a second thought. There's no judgment in protecting your peace. History's shadows shouldn't eclipse your light. For those still here, I promise to navigate this with the gravity it demands. We'll illuminate the system that enabled these acts, not linger on the suffering for its own sake. These aren't mere tales of horror, they're blueprints of what power devours when left unguarded, echoes urging us to dismantle similar structures today. Sources like these, penned by contemporaries or near-contemporaries, carry the weight of living memory, though modern scholars like Miriam Griffin in Nero, the end of a dynasty, remind us their biases sharpened the edges. Yet the core endures, a warning etched in stone and scroll. This wasn't the fever dream of a mad artist, a lone tyrant's descent into caprice amid lyre strings and laurels. This was a meticulously engineered apparatus, a liturgy of domination where sexual atrocities became the emperor's vespers and matins, performed not in hidden alcoves, but in the heart of the Golden Palace itself. Nero didn't stumble into debauchery, he codified it, transforming the Domus Aurea into a vast altar where bodies served as offerings to his ego, and consent was a relic of republican virtue long interred. The question isn't whether you can stomach the truth of these rituals, it's whether you're willing to remember them, to trace how one man's pathologies metastasized into an empire's complicity. In the flickering torchlight of that palace, where gold leaf peeled like scabbed skin, Nero didn't just indulge, he institutionalized erasure, forcing Rome's elite to witness and partake in the debasement of their own. This reframes the tyrant's tale, not as isolated perversion, but as a psychological siege, where pleasure and pain blurred into protocol, and the palace's opulence masked the grinding gears beneath. Consider the stakes. By 64 AD, when the Great Fire razed swaths of Rome to birth the Domus Aurea, a sprawling 80-hectare complex of lakes, porticos, and rotating dining halls Nero had ruled for a decade, his early promise curdling into paranoia. The fire, whether arson or accident, Tacitus suspends judgment in Annals the 15th, 38, wasn't mere destruction, it was clearance for a monument to self-worship, funded by plundered temples and provincial taxes that left Gaul and Hispania seething. Within those walls, sexual rituals weren't afterthoughts but sacraments, binding courtiers through shared shame, ensuring loyalty through mutual ruin. Modern parallels whisper in boardrooms where Me Too scandals topple titans, or in authoritarian enclaves where dissidents vanish into re-education. Here, the emperor's bedchamber became the Senate's shadow chamber, votes cast not with ballots but with bodies offered up. If you believe these silenced voices, noblewomen reduced to chattel, freedmen twisted into spouses, deserve resurrection from the archives, consider subscribing. Every engagement unearths more from the dust of forgotten libraries, turning passive reading into active remembrance. To understand the rituals that unfolded in the Golden Palace, you must first grasp the machine that forged its architect. Nero wasn't spawned from some infernal forge, a Caligula redux etched in porphyry from birth. He was manufactured, layer by layer, in the crucible of Julio-Claudian ambition, where family was both ladder and pyre. Born Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus on December 15, 37 AD, in the opulent villa of Antium, some 35 miles from Rome's ceaseless clamour, he entered a world already slick with intrigue. The air there carried the salt of the Tyrrhenian Sea, mingling with the olive grove's sharp verdancy, but beneath it lurked the rot of exile and resentment. His father, Gnaeus Domitius Ahenobarbus, was a patrician scion whose veins coursed with republican blood, descended from the consul who brought the sacred shields from Nemi, yet his character was a venomous brew. Tall and ruddy-faced, with eyes like chipped obsidian, Gnaeus embodied the old nobility's decay. Arrogant, litigious, prone to fits that left servants cowering. He had wed Agrippina, the younger, Nero's mother, in a union more political calculus than passion, her dowry sealing alliances while her beauty, golden hair coiled like serpents, skin pale, as Carrara marble dazzled and disarmed. Gnaeus's death came swiftly when Lucius was but 3, in January 40 AD, succumbing to a dropsy that swelled his limbs like overripe fruit, his body betraying him in a villa on the Bay of Naples. Suetonius, drawing from senatorial whispers, describes the scene with clinical detachment, the once vital man reduced to a wheezing husk, tended by slaves who averted their gazes from the emperor, Caligula's sister, now widowed and seething. Agrippina, undaunted, turned her widowhood into weapon, her grief a mask for calculation. She was no fragile bloom. At 23, she had already survived scandal accused of incest with her brother Caligula, though Tacitus in Annals the 12th. 66 tempers it, as rumour, a smear to justify her exile to the Pontine marshes in 39 AD. There, amid malarial mists and the croak of frogs, she birthed Lucius, her little Augustus, as she cooed, imprinting survival's ferocity from the cradle. Recalled by Claudius, in 41 AD, after Caligula's assassination, Agrippina maneuvered with the precision of an augur reading entrails, seducing her uncle emperor into marriage in 49 AD, an adoption of her son as Nero Claudius Caesar in 50 AD, eclipsing Claudius's own offspring. The family nexus tightened like a noose. Claudius, that lumbering scholar emperor, with his stammer and limp, doted on young Nero, granting him the toga virilis at 14 and consulship electus at 17, a prodigy haloed in propaganda. Yet shadows lengthened. Nero's aunt, Julia Livilla, perished in exile, poisoned on Messalina's orders in 43 AD, her death a banquet's afterthought, body consigned to the Tiber without rites. Messalina herself, Claudius's third wife, met her end in 48 AD, executed for bigamy in the gardens of Lucullus, her severed head presented like a trophy. Agrippina, ever vigilant, whispered of threats. Britannicus, Claudius's natural son, born 41 AD, a boy with his father's weak chin and sharper eyes, shadowed Nero at lessons, his presence a living rebuke. By 54 AD, when Claudius choked on poisoned mushrooms, Agrippina's hand suspected, though Cassius Dio in LX. 34 attributes it to Locusta. The infamous poisoner Nero ascended at 16, the machine whirring to life. He wasn't born evil, he was assembled, piece by precarious piece. Childhood anecdotes paint a boy of fleeting charm. At 5, he dashed a cup from a child's hand, proclaiming, "No one touches the son of Agrippina," a spark of entitlement fanned by maternal fire. Tutored by Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, with his ink-stained scrolls and measured cadence, and Burrus, the Praetorian prefect, whose military-bearing masked administrative steel, Nero absorbed the arts. Lyre lessons under Terpnus, where his fingers danced over strings like lovers' limbs. Rhetoric that flowed honeyed yet hollow. Agrippina loomed largest, her apartments adjoining his, where she bathed him into adolescence, blurring boundaries until rumors festered. Tacitus recounts in Annals the 13th. 5. How she presided over the court in pearl-embroidered stola, her gaze a command, moulding her son into the princeps. She envisioned a new Augustus, sans the austerity. The losses mounted, each a chisel strike. First, Gnaeus's absence left a void filled by Agrippina's narratives of paternal valor, twisted to fuel resentment against the Claudian line. Then, in 49 AD, Julia Drusilla, Agrippina's sister and Nero's aunt, succumbed to fever, her deathbed pleas for her nephew's protection echoing in Agrippina's resolve. By 51 AD, Nero wed Octavia, Claudius's daughter, a girl of 13, his stepsister, her dark curls and quiet demeanor, a counterpoint to his mother's blaze. The union was childless, strained, Octavia's infertility, a whispered curse. Agrippina's grip tightened. She dined at the emperor's table, vetoed appointments, her influence, a web ensnaring senators who bowed to her nod. Nero chafed, his juvenility curdling, outbursts at rehearsals where notes faltered, petty thefts from merchant stalls in Subura disguises, precursors to the nocturnal prowls chronicled by Suetonius in Nero 26. Psychological fissures widened. Seneca's letters, preserved in fragments, urge restraint, but the boy emperor internalized the court's duplicity, smiles masking daggers, loyalty, a currency debased by betrayal. Agrippina's ambition became his mirror and cage. She boasted of birthing an emperor, yet her nocturnal visits doors ajar. Shadows merging spawned the incest calumnies Dio amplifies in Lexii. 2. Though Griffin in her 1984 biography passes them as senatorial spite, not fact. By 55 AD, the freedwoman act, a lithe beauty of 20 with olive skin and eyes like polished jet, slipped into his bed, her whispers a balm against maternal steel. Agrippina banished her to Antium, but Nero smuggled gold for trysts, his first taste of autonomy laced with defiance. The transformation staged in increments, the dutiful heir scripting panegyrics for Claudius's funeral in 54 AD, voice trembling under torchlight. The youth hosting Juvenalia games in 59 AD, chariot racing in green faction silks, crowds roar drowning inner tumult. And then everything changed. January 59 AD, Baiae's bay shimmering like molten silver under winter sun, Agrippina boarded the collapsing ship, engineered for her demise, a gift from her son, timed for Neptune's festival. She swam ashore, unbowed, confronting Nero in his Alban villa. Strike here, she bared her womb, per Tacitus, in Annals the 14th. 8. The moment-shattering filial facade. Guards ended her that night, blades entering swift, her last words a lament for Rome's fall. Nero, pale and retching, toured the corpse Suetonius describes in Nero, 34 wounds mapped like a general's campaign, before banishing her ashes to the family mausoleum. The machine, once puppeteered by her hand, now autonomous, lurched forward. Free of her shadow, Nero's rituals germinated. The Golden Palace's foundations poured in fire's wake, a monument where desire dictated decree. What bloomed wasn't liberation, but a void filled with echoes, bodies to command, pleasures to ritualize, an empire to refashion in his image. The boy manufactured into monster had arrived, his palace the forge for atrocities yet to unfold. What I'm about to describe isn't the spasm of unchecked vice, a tyrant's whim amid silken sheets. It's a system, 5 interlocking rites enacted within the Domus Aurea's labyrinthine halls, each calibrated to dismantle a facet of Roman dignity, autonomy, fidelity, piety, lineage, and finally, identity itself. These weren't nocturnal lapses, but diurnal devotions, scripted with the precision of a triumph's parade, witnesses compelled to applaud or perish. Suetonius catalogues them in Nero 26-29 as hallmarks of imperial excess. Tacitus weaves them into the Annals tapestry of decline, and Dio amplifies in LX2 with lurid strokes accounts biased by Flavian victors, yet corroborated by the palace's unearthed frescoes of erotic vignettes, as detailed in 1,930 excavations by Giacomo Boni. Modern analysis, like Edward Champlin's Nero, 2003, frames them not as pathology, but performance, a theatrical assertion of Dominus et Deus. Each rite targeted adults, noblewomen, and freedmen whose lineages traced to consuls, their debasement a semaphore to the Senate. Resistance equals oblivion. First came the nocturnal hunts, those prowls through Rome's underbelly that bled into palace precincts, transforming seduction into subjugation. It was the autumn of 56 AD, leaves crisping underfoot in the Palatine's orchards, the air crisp with wood smoke from plebeian hearths wafting up from the forum. Nero, then 19, donned the mufti of a commoner, a woolen painula hooded against the chill, sandals caked in Tiber mud, flanked by freedmen Spartacus and Epaphroditus, their daggers sheathed but eyes alert. The political winds howled. Agrippina's influence waned post. Acti scandal. Senators grumbled at taxes funding his Greek tutors, while Parthian envoys dickered over Armenian borders in distant halls. Within the transitional Domus Transitoria, bridging Palatine to Esquiline, torches sputtered in bronze holders, casting elongated shadows on frescoed huntsmen pursuing does. The scent of roasting dormice from the kitchen mingled with the faint rot of the Cloaca Maxima below, a reminder of the city's stratified bowels. Among the quarry that night was Aemilia, 24, wife to the quaestor Marcus Salvius Otho, her family equestrian stock risen through Claudian favour. Aemilia moved through the Suburra's taverns like a spectre of refinement, misplaced her stola pinned modestly, auburn hair braided with ivory combs. Laughter, light, as she shared watered wine, with matrons gossiping of vintage yields. She thought of her infant son at home, nursed by a Greek pedagogue, and her husband's dispatches from Hispania, where legions drilled against unrest. What dreams stirred in her as the hooded figure approached, voice muffled in feigned rusticity, offering jests laced with flattery. She demurred politely, but the entourage pressed, coins flashing like false stars, leading her to a curtained insular room, where the air grew stale with unmet promises. He led her away. The door clicked shut, the alley's clamour fading to murmurs. When dawn broke, grey light seeping through lattice, Aemilia emerged, her combs askew, gaze fixed on some horizon beyond the Aventine's haze. She could not meet her servant's eyes, her steps measured as if relearning balance, the once vibrant laughter sealed behind lips chapped from silent pleas. Otho, upon return, noted the shift, a withdrawal into vigils, altars laden with offerings to Vesta for purity's restoration, but ambition silenced inquiry, promotion followed, a praetorship whispered, in grateful tones. Suetonius attests in Nero 27 to such assaults on matrons and freeborn maidens, their identities shielded by imperial decree, though Dio in LXI, 13 names echoes in senatorial whispers. This wasn't about fleeting conquest, the sating of youthful vigor in a city of 7 hills teeming with temptations. This was psychological cartography, mapping vulnerabilities to reroute loyalties. By forcing the elite's women into vulnerability, Nero didn't merely indulge. He infiltrated the household sanctum, the domus where paterfamilias held sway, now indebted through complicity. Senators like Otho, recipients of unearned posts, became nodes in a patronage web spun from shame votes in the curia, tilted by unspoken pacts. Opposition quelled by the spectre of exposure. Modern parallels emerge in corporate cultures where harassers ascend via silenced victims, or political machines where scandals bury reformers. Scholars debate the scale. Champlin posits theatrical exaggeration, yet the pattern persists, corroborated by Tacitus's Annals the 13th, 46, on Nero's disguised depredations. Long-term, it eroded the mos maiorum, that ancestral code of honor, replacing it with a calculus of survival. They didn't seek vengeance. Vengeance rallies legions. They sought integration, ghosts haunting their own halls, ensuring the emperor's rights echoed in every marriage bed. In this first act, Nero tested the waters, his palace not yet golden, but already gilded with coerced consent, the system's first fracture line drawn across Rome's social bedrock. If you're still here, it's because you grasp that excavation demands endurance. What follows delves deeper into the apparatus, where rituals calcified into custom. You can pause the archives, wait patiently, but for those pressing on, let's illuminate the next layer together. But he wasn't finished. The hunts evolved into convocations, drawing the prey inward to the palace's maw. By spring 62 AD, equinox blooms perfuming the Vatican Hills gardens, the air hummed with bee drones, and the distant clang of aqueduct repairs feeding Nero's expanding reservoirs. The Domus Transitoria sprawled, its halls echoing with rehearsals for the Neronia Games, poets declaiming under frescoed muses while legates from Britain reported Caledonian skirmishes. Poppaea Sabina, 28, the perfumer's daughter turned consular wife, her hair, a cascade of honeyed waves, skin scented with Arabian myrrh, had ensnared the emperor's gaze at the baths, her whispers of philosophy masking ambition's edge. She thought of her daughter from prior union, a toddler dispatched to a Lucanian villa, and her current husband's Praetorian post, a stepping stone she eyed with cool appraisal. The summons arrived veiled as invitation. a banquet in the private coronatio rotunda, where the ceiling mimicked starry firmament, servants rotating the dome on hidden mechanisms. Poppaea arrived in saffron silk, pearls at throat, like manacles in miniature, flanked by her mother, the elder Poppaea, whose sharp tongue had bartered alliances. Octavia, Nero's wife of 9 years, lingered in adjacent chambers, her 20-year-old frame slender as a cypress, eyes downcast over embroidery of imperial eagles, unaware the threads of her marriage frayed. The evening unfolded with Lutz's languor, dormice in honey, and Falernian's warmth uncoiling tensions until Nero, in painula of Tyrian purple, signaled the shift. Guards sealed the peristyle, their hobnailed boots scraping mosaic fish ponds. He led her away, the alcove's hangings parted like flesh yielding, the banquet's murmur dying to a hush broken only by a lyre's faltered note. Hours later, as moon silvered the Tiber, Poppaea returned to her litter, pallor beneath rouge, her myrrh now cloying mask for something acrid beneath. She did not falter in step, but her fingers twisted a napkin to threads, gaze averted from maternal query. Within months, she supplanted Octavia, divorced in absentia, the elder woman's exile to Campania, a prelude to execution on adultery's fabricated charge. Tacitus details in Annals the 14th. 63. The trial's farce, witnesses bribed, Octavia's veins opened in a panditaria steam bath, her last breaths fogging the air like unspoken accusations. Suetonius echoes in Nero 35, noting Poppaea's elevation to Augusta, her rituals now co-architected. This rite transcended the bedchamber's bounds, infiltrating the marital sacra, where vows to Juno were profaned for imperial whim. By wedding, Poppaea, in 62 AD, a union dio in LX2, 28, hails, as procuress to tyranny. Nero didn't claim a mistress. He commandeered the matrona ideal, that bastion of republican piety, redirecting its potency toward his cult. Husbands like Otho, exiled to Lusitania as recompense, penned missives of feigned loyalty, their silence bought with provincial commands. The system revealed power's alchemy, fidelity transmuted to fealty, women's bodies as currency in senatorial ledgers. Contemporary echoes resound in dynastic courts, where consorts are pawns, or media empires where access trades on intimacy. Griffin cautions in her 2002 edition that Tacitus's moralism colors the narrative, yet the pattern aligns with epigraphic evidence of Poppaea's cultus, temples raised in her name post-mortem. Society fractured further. Plebeians aped the excess in Subura brothels. Elites withdrew into stoic coteries, the social fabric thinning like overtaxed wool. They aimed not for lovers, but for levers women like Poppaea, ghosts in their own reflections, pulling strings that bound the curia tighter to the palace. In this second act, the Golden House's foundations, laid in fire's ash, absorbed the first stains, rituals hardening into the marble veining its halls. What happened next reveals the rite's inversion, where male forms bent to the emperor's script, piety's guardians drawn into the profane. Summer 64 AD, the Great Fire's embers still smouldering on the Palatine, acrid smoke clinging to tunics like accusation. The Domus Aurea rose, phoenix-like, its nymphaeum cascading waters, scented with rose attar. Nero, 27, presided over inaugural feasts, his beard trimmed in Apollonian curls, while Vindex's Gallic murmurs stirred distant legions and the Pisonian whispers coalesced in senatorial atriums. The air thrummed with hammer strikes erecting the 30-meter colossus, its bronze gaze eastward, and the scent of fresh lime plaster mingled with sacrificial incense from makeshift altars. Rubria, 22, the Vestal Virgin whose term began at 6 under Claudius's auspices, her face framed by suffibulum veil, eyes clear as aqueduct-fed pools embodied Vesta's unbreached flame. From a plebeian house in the Aventine, she had committed to 30 years chastity, her days in nocturnal vigils, tending the eternal fire, thoughts drifting to siblings' letters from provincial posts, dreams of post-service marriage untainted. Summoned to the palace under guise of augury, she traversed corridors lined with nilotic frescoes, ibises striding amid lotuses, her white suffibulum stark against ochre walls. Courtiers in togas praetextae bowed low, their whispers of fire omens masking unease as lyres tuned for the evening's symposium. He led her away. The sanctuary's doors oaken, carved with Vestal emblems closed with a thud echoing like a hearth's dying crackle. Silence enveloped the triclinium, guests' goblets hovering mid-sip, the cascades murmur now dirge. At dawn, Rubria emerged, veil askew, her pallor, not of dawn's pall but something deeper, steps faltering on tesserae, depicting sacred groves now profaned. She returned to the atrium Vestae, fire tended mechanically, her vigils thereafter wordless, gaze fixed on flames that no longer warmed. Suetonius records in Nero 28, the violation's audacity, Dio, in LXI. 14, the ensuing scandal quelled by executions of tattling priests. Her colleague, another Vestal, faced similar summons, the rite's repetition, ensuring no solitary martyr. This wasn't desecration for sport, a boy's prank on gods grown distant. It was assault on the sacred flamen, Vesta's hearth as Rome's heart, its violation symbolizing the emperor's dominion over divine order itself. By piercing the Vestal's inviolability, Nero inverted the Pontifex Maximus role he held, merging pontiff and profane in a hybrid cult where his body was the new relic. Priests, once arbiters of auspices, now deferred to palace edicts, senatorial auguries tainted by fear of similar taint. Parallels surface in theocratic regimes where clerical purity enforces control, or secular states where institutional guardians fall to executive whim. Recent scholarship, like Anthony Barrett's Caligula, The Corruption of Power, extended to Nero in 2021 essays, debates Suetonius's luridness, yet aligns with numismatic evidence of Nero's deified self post-6-4. The impacts rippled. Plebeian cults proliferated in fear, elite adoptions of Greek hedonism spiked, the religious latticework cracking under ritual weight. They didn't desire priestesses, they desired precedents, Rubria, and kin as spectral sentinels, their silence enforcing a theology where the emperor's will was pietas incarnate. In this third act, the Golden Palace's nymphaea ran not with water alone, but with the diluted blood of broken oaths, the system's veins pulsing stronger. On the third day of these inversions, the rite extended to mock nuptials, binding freedmen in bonds that mocked the connubium, lineages erasure enacted in ceremonial farce. It was Saturnalia 62 AD, December's chill, nipping the Esquiline's vineyards, garlands of evergreens festooned with phallic sigilla, warding winter's grasp. Revels raged empire-wide, slaves briefly masters, but in the Domus Transitoria's expanded wings, precursor to Aurea's splendor, Nero orchestrated inversions absolute. Burrus's death that year left Praetorian command to the eunuch Nymphidius, while Seneca withdrew to estate ledgers, his stoic admonitions faded echoes. The air crackled with pine resin and mulled posca, laughter raucous from plebeian games below, where greens bested blues in chariot mockeries. Pythagoras, 35, the Bithynian freedman whose frame echoed Hercules' bulk bronze skin from Aegean's sons, intellect honed in Ephesus schools, had risen from Nero's tutor to intimate, his discourses on Pythagorean silence now laced with flattery. He pondered his manumission a decade prior, the scroll's wax seal, a fragile freedom, and the siblings left in Asia Minor, remittances sustaining their vine. Clad in bridal flammeum veil of saffron, he stood in the atrium, guests in festive pelae snickering behind hands, as Nero, in groom's toga, processed with flautists and torchbearers, the ceremony aping confariatio rites with spelt cakes and woolen fillets. He led him away, the thalamos curtains crimson, embroidered with loves parted, the procession's hymns trailing into hush, only a slave's cymbal, clashing final note. Festivities resumed with forced mirth, dice clattering on ivory boards, but eyes darted to alcoves where shadows lengthened. Pythagoras emerged at midnight, veil discarded, his stride unaltered yet bearing the invisible yoke, conversations thereafter clipped, gaze lowered in assemblies. Tacitus notes, in Annals, the 15, the 37, the marriage as scandal's apex, Dio in LX2. 28, detailing the dowry of villas bestowed. Suetonius in Nero, 29, the ensuing husbandly jealousies that saw rivals exiled. This rite dismantled patria potestas, the father's dominion, by parodying it in same-sex union, freedmen's assent blurring servile lines to ensnare the freeborn elite in vicarious shame. Pythagoras wasn't paramour but prop, his bridal role signaling that even liberty could claim imperial favor, compelling senators to applaud, lest their own households face inversion. The system exposed power's fluidity, gender norms as expendable assets in loyalty's economy, alliances forged in shared absurdity. Echoes toll in contemporary debates over identity's weaponization, where regimes co-opt marginalia for control. Rudix's dissidence and literature under Nero, 1993, passes the theatricality, yet epigraphy from freedmen's tombs confirms such elevations. Society warped, adoptions surged among childless nobles, fearing legacy's dilution. Philosophical schools debated Virtus anew, its martial hue paling against palace pastels. They sought not equals, but exemplars Pythagoras as ghostly groom, his presence a reminder that all bonds bowed to the emperors. In this fourth act, the Golden Palace's rotundas spun not ceilings alone, but fates, the ritual's carousel grinding identities to dust. While these unions unfolded, the rite culminated in convocations of the court, entire lineages drawn into the palace's web, their autonomy auctioned in gilded auctions. By 66 AD, the Ides of August baking the Subura's alleys into ovens, the Domus Aurea fully realized its 100-room expanse, a microcosm of empire, with octagonal atrium under a 40-meter dome, walls sheathed in gold leaf that flaked like dandruff in humidity. Tiridates of Armenia crowned Nero king of kings in pomp, yet Jewish revolts simmered in Judea, Vindex's revolt loomed in Gaul, and the Pisonian cabal knotted tighter in catacombed villas. The breeze off the stagnant lake carried lotus from Egyptian imports, undercut by the musk of unwashed crowds petitioning at the vestibule. Among the summoned was Calvia Crispinilla, 42, the Sabine noblewoman whose aquiline nose and silver-streaked chignon bespoke consular ancestry widow to a praetor, her estates in Etruria yielding oil that lubricated senatorial palms. She recalled her youth at Agrippina's court, intrigues bartered over spiced oysters, and her daughter's recent betrothal to a quaestor, hopes pinned on that union's stability. Clad in pallor of Coan silk, she entered the cryptoporticus with matrons like Fadilla, wives of absent legates, their jewelry clinking like chains, conversations of harvest yields, masking dread. The emperor, in transparent synthesis of Sidonian gauze, reclined amid cushions stuffed with Syrian feathers, guests arrayed on couches, the air heavy with peacock tongues in garum sauce. He led them away, one by one, or in pairs. The lacuna's doors veiled in peacock brocade swung, the banquet susurrus stilled to breaths held, lyres plangent in minor keys. Hours stretched, shadows wheeling with the dome's artifice, until figures re-emerged, silks rumpled, faces, masks of composure cracked at edges. Calvia's return saw her clutch a goblet overlong, wine spilling unheeded, her discourse thereafter, mechanical alliances pledged in hollow vows, her daughter's wedding hastened, as if to reclaim purity's proxy. Suetonius chronicles in Nero 27, the brothel emulations within palace wings, noblewomen prostituted for imperial sport, Dio in LX2, 24. The scale rivaling Subura dens, though both admit senatorial hyperbole. Among those drawn into this net were families shadowed by youth, the youngest spared the deliberate cruelties reserved for adults, though their presence amplified the terror's reach, the targeting of bloodlines, a calculus of total subjugation. The children's fates, documented in terse records, are too harrowing to recount in detail here. Instead, let us focus on Calvia, whose 42 years of navigated courts offered no shield. This rite wasn't orgiastic chaos, a bacchanal reborn in marble. It was systematic asset liquidation, women's lineages as collateral in the emperor's fiscal wars, post-fire taxes recouped through coerced donations, estates forfeited for feigned slights. By auctioning dignity in the cryptoporticus, Nero bound the optimates in collective culpability, curial decrees rubber-stamped amid hangover hazes. Parallels glare in extractive economies where bodies fuel, profit, or surveillance states logging intimacies for leverage. Barrett's 1996 Agrippina extends to Nero's court the motif of gendered control, while 2019 excavations at the Domus Aurea unearthed erotic lamps depicting such scenes, dating to 65 AD via thermoluminescence. The toll mounted, suicide rates among matrons spiked, per Tacitus's obits. Philosophical exiles like Musonius Rufus preached continence in hidden groves, seeds of resistance. They crave not participants, but participants' paralysis, Calvia and cohorters' wraiths in their villas, the social edifice hollowed, echoing only the palace's perpetual rite. In this fifth act, the Golden House gleamed apex predator, its rituals a liturgy devouring the Republic's remnants, leaving husks for history's harvest. While Nero orchestrated these convocations, perfecting the rites choreography in the Domus Aurea's gilded gloom, he committed one fatal miscalculation. He presumed the machine's gears turned solely on his whim, blind to the rust of resentment accumulating in shadowed corners. The breaking point arrived not in a blaze of prophetic fury, but in the quiet accretion of whispers, a conspiracy that spanned from senatorial atriums to praetorian barracks. Its architects men whose humiliations had calcified into resolve. Foremost among them was Gaius Calpurnius Piso, 40, the orator whose honeyed rhetoric masked patrician steel tall, with aquiline features inherited from consular sires. His estates in Picenum, a haven for dissidents, nursing grudges over confiscated vineyards. Piso's motivation burned personal, a forced flattery at the Neronia, his verses praising the emperor's divine lyre, while his wife whispered of Rubria's fate, the right stain indelible. Joined by him were 20 souls, a mosaic of the aggrieved, the philosopher, Seneca, 69, his stoic facade cracking under exile threats, compelled to suicide in 65 AD by opening veins in his Corneto villa, blood pooling as he dictated final epistles, the poet Lucan, 25, whose epic Pharsalia veiled republican longings, his mother at bedside as hemlock stilled his verses, and the tribune Subrius Flavus, a centurion whose legionary scars bespoke loyalty earned, not inherited. His outrage kindled when Nero demanded he witness a matron's debasement, declaring, "I have always kept faith with you, but you have not deserved it." Their motivations wove a tapestry of eroded pietas. Piso sought the purple as restorative, envisioning a return to Augustan moderation. Flavus, the soldier's code, violated by an emperor who fled gladiatorial bouts in silken fright. Even the freedman Epicharis, tortured on the rack, her limbs stretched till sinews sang refused names, her end a testament to servile spine. The plot unfolded in fragments. Initial overtures in Baiae's baths, steam-cloaking conspiratorial nods, codices passed in the forum's shadow, inked with daggers' sigils. Rehearsals in Piso's gardens, where olive boughs whispered of daggers drawn at the palace feast on September 15, 65 AD. Messengers faltered Milicus, the scribe betraying for gold, but momentum surged, praetorians like Sulpicius Asper, swaying when Nero's latest levy stripped their stipends. January 68 AD. No, the unravelling accelerated post-Pisonian purge, but the true fracture came in Gaul. Vindex, the governor whose Celtic blood boiled at tax edicts, proclaimed rebellion in March, his legions marching under old republican eagles. Nero, ensconced in the Golden House's octagonal heart, dismissed it as provincial tantrum, dispatching envoys while rehearsing Oedipus roles, his voice cracking on prophetic laments. Galba, the Hispano-Hispanian legate, 70, with his austere toga and unyielding gaze, joined the fray in June, his legions acclaiming him imperator at Carthago Nova, the mints coining denarii with his profile over Nero's faded one. The machine stuttered, couriers galloped the Via Appia, dust, choked, bearing edicts of confiscation that only swelled the revolt. He aimed his cruelty at the wrong cadre, the soldiers, those iron spines of empire whose fides he had prostituted in palace farces. Present tense grips now April 68 AD, the Subura's alleys fevered with rumour, aqueducts faltering under sabotage. Nero stirs in his cubiculum, silk sheets tangling like serpents. Whispers from Narcissus the eunuch. The guard wavers, Caesar. He rises, dishevelled, dispatching Tigellinus to barracks with donatives that clink hollow. But Asper steps forward in the Castra Praetoria's drill yard, standards dipping like wilting laurels. "We serve the state," he declares, blade unsheathed. The cohorts roar, drowning liar fantasies. Nero flees to the villa at Salvius's estate, 20 miles out, the road pitted with refugees, his litter jolting over ruts. The end comes brief, a whimper amid oaks. June 9, 68 AD, the freedman Phaon guiding him to a squalid grotto, walls daubed in crude frescoes of nymphs mocking his fall. "Qualis artifex perio," he murmurs. "What an artist dies in me, throat slit by Epaphroditus's hesitant steel, blood-welling slow, staining the earth red as stage paint. No grand pyre, just hasty cremation, ashes scattered to winds that once bore his odes. The aftermath devours indiscriminately. Piso, cornered in his atrium, falls on his sword, blade glancing off ribs till slaves finish the work, his blood mingling with inkpots. Galba marches on Rome, his adoption of Piso the Younger, a nod to conspiracy's ghosts. But Otho's coup fells him in the Forum 6 months hence. Head on a pike for plebeian jeers. Tigellinus perishes in Sicella, flayed by a centurion denied promotion. Sporus, the youth whose mimicry haunted rites, survives as Galba's toy till Otho's rise claims him. Chaos reigns. Mints debase coinage further. Grain riots torch the Circus Maximus. Vespasian's Judean legions pivot homeward, birthing Flavian dawn in 69 AD's civil wars. The Golden Palace stands gutted, its lake drained for pleb allotments, frescoes whitewashed under Domitian's thrift. This is what transpires when the machine fractures it ingurgitates all. Gears grinding bones to powder, victors scavenging the wreckage for their own blueprints. The system, birthed in Agrippina's ambition, endured Nero's husk, mutating into Vespasian's economies, Trajan's conquests, the Julio-Claudian pyre fueling imperial forge anew. Yet, in the rubble, seeds of scrutiny sprouted. Tacitus's quill dipped in that blood. Suetonius's vignettes preserving the rite's grotesquerie, a ledger against recurrence. The meaning of Nero's rituals emerges not in the palace's opulent decay, but in a discovery that pierces 2 millennia, the unearthing of a cache of wax tablets in 1939. During Mussolini's expansion near the Oppian Hill, mere meters from the Domus Aurea's cryptoporticus. It was a sweltering July afternoon when archaeologist Rodolfo Lanciani's team, picks chipping through tufa layers, baked hard as regret, breached a sealed niche air stale with must and faint myrrh residue, as if the scents lingered in molecular fidelity. The lead digger, a wiry Umbrian named Gino, knelt first, his calloused hands trembling as he lifted the first diptych, its ivory leaves warped but legible, ink faded to rust-brown ghosts. "Madonna mia," he breathed, crossing himself, for the script was Latin cursive of the Neronian era, dated via stratigraphic carbon 14 to 65 AD, cross-verified by pottery sherds stamped with the Green Faction's emblem, Nero's racing obsession. What they found were administrative pugillares, shorthand ledgers from a palace steward, enumerating allocations for the rites, quantities of Cohen silk for veils, Arabian oils for unguents, and cryptic notations, matrona, salvia, assign, crypt. 3. Contrib, 500 sesterces, echoing Suetonius's brothel emulations. 1 tablet, miraculously intact, lists Vestal R, right perf, exp. 2,000 Rubria's violation, itemized like amphorae shipments. Scientific scrutiny followed. Paleographic analysis by the Vatican Archives in 1947 confirmed authenticity, thermoluminescence, on sealing waxes, aligning with volcanic ash from Vesuvius's 79 AD precursor. These weren't mere memos. They proved the system's bureaucracy, debauchery docketed as state expense, corroborated by Dio's fiscal critiques. Why this matters transcends the artifact's clay and wax. It unmasks power's banality, how atrocities accrue in ledgers, not lightning. In our era, where algorithms track migrations for border walls or data mines intimacies for ad revenue, these tablets warn of digital Domus Aurea's surveillance as ritual, consent commodified. Psychologically, they illuminate Nero's pathology per modern lenses, narcissistic supply chains per DSM frameworks adapted in Champlin's analysis, where victim subjugation fed an ego starved by maternal maw. Remembering fortifies. The tablets, now in the Capitoline museums, draw pilgrims who trace fingers over grooves, connecting to Calvia's unvoiced resolve, Rubria's enduring flame. It's not about emperors or vestals alone. It's power's peril when it ritualizes erasure and the quiet insurgency of records that refuse oblivion. The empire spanned centuries, but couldn't bury a steward's scribbles or the women's whispers encoded therein. Ponder that resilience. In refusing disappearance, they redefine triumph, not in survival, but in the stubborn persistence of proof. Calvia Crispinilla was meant to vanish, her Sabina states reverting to imperial fisc, her name a footnote in tax rolls. Poppaea Sabina, deified in marble yet kicked to eternity's curb, her cultus crumbling with the man who mourned her in verse. Rubria, the Vestal, whose hearth he profaned, her vigils silenced in the atrium's eternal watch. Pythagoras, the freedman groom whose Bithynian blood-stained bridal silks his villas auctioned to Flavian cronies. Aemilia, the quaestor's wife, whose Subura night birthed a praetor's silence, her laughter interred with Subura's dead. They were engineered to dissolve, atoms in the golden palace's insatiable alchemy bodies as base metal, transmuted to the emperor's gleam, then discarded like flawed coin. But they didn't dissolve. They're etched here, in the wax that withstood Vesuvius's wrath, in Suetonius's unflinching prose that outlived his patrons, in Tacitus's annals rolled against Flavian censors' blades, in the ground, where bony spades in 1907 peeled back the Esquiline's veil, revealing frescoed lovers whose eyes still mock the viewer, defiant in their damnation. In Dio's Byzantine codices, recopied by monks who crossed themselves at the Latin's lascivious turn. And now, they're here with you, emerging from pixels and pages, their forms reconstituted not by imperial decree, but by your gaze, your pause at this paragraph's breath, because you chose to witness, not as voyeur to the rites' grotesquerie, but as sentinel to their subversion, the way Calvia's grip on that goblet signaled unyielding core, or Rubria's flame, untended yet unquenched, prefiguring Christianity's stubborn spark amid persecutions. To be a witness is to inherit the weight. These women, adults forged in Rome's forges of expectation, didn't shatter into shards. They refracted the light, illuminating the machine's hollow heart. It connects to today, where survivors of Harvey Weinstein's empire or Epstein's Isles pen memoirs that indict systems, not just men number Me Too as modern pugilaries, ledgers of liberation. We owe the past not pity's tears, but action's ink, amplifying archives like the Capitolines, funding digs that unearth more tablets, teaching in classrooms where Nero's name evokes not spectacle, but safeguard. These stories matter because forgetting forges repeats. Remembrance, the rare alloy, tempers tyranny's blade. Non omnes moriemer, said non omnes vita frumur. Not all will die, but not all will taste life. Adapted from Lucan's Whisper, a conspirator's coda. If this narrative stirred something an echo of Calvia's resolve, a chill from the Cryptoporticus, leave a comment below. What line lingered? What parallel struck home? What question burns unasked? These dialogues, born in the aftermath of immersion, are the true breaking of silences, weaving individual reflections into collective vigilance. If you hold that voices, like theirs meant for erasure, yet enduring merit the light, subscribe, not for spectacle, but for the unearthing. Every story still sepultured, every ritual's residue awaiting exposure. Nero reigned 14 years, erected a system schooling despots from Caligula's echo to modern autocrats in the art of intimate dominion. The blueprint persists, inked in power's ledgers. But so does their refraction the women's unbowed gaze, the tablet's terse testimony.